Folks, there was really only one way to start this stream. It's not a laughing matter, Pat. Why are you laughing?
Come on. I thought the connection cut out or something. And
no, it didn't. Everyone, welcome back to Off the Bench. I'm Brandon Carney alongside Pat Gustafson. Look, I just couldn't stand having a jovial jazz tune be the only way that we start this podcast off. The beginning of this is going to be very depressing. There's a lot of injuries, but one in particular that is just incredibly upsetting. Also, anybody in the chat, let me know if the connection is really bad or anything like that, because I'm kind of trying. I'm in a new place. I'm hoping it's not bad. If it's bad, I may just end the stream and re-record or something. But what we're at here is the Nick Chubb injury. I'm sitting there, Pat. I just bought a nice new TV, new apartment. If you guys can't tell, we're in a new spot.
They both have great background spaces now.
Both great, dude. So much detail. And, you know, I'm just chilling out on the couch watching Browns game. My fantasy matchup was already locked up heading into last night. So I wanted to watch my buddy Nick Chubb tear it up, see what we've got.
Oh, don't say that.
Brutal. Oh, that's not what I meant. Brutal knee injury for Nick Chubb. I hate to say this too, and it's probably not the case, but potential career ender, career at least in jeopardy with the age that he's at.
I think it's career, jeopardizing his career in the sense that, like, I think we'll see him again, but it'll probably be a shell of his former self with the age, with such a significant injury. The second time he's had a significant injury to that knee. It sucks, and it was bad. It was bad, because, like, the play itself, watching in real time, you didn't think much of it. And, I mean, especially with Chubb just kind of sitting there holding his knee, and then they're talking about, we're not showing this. So, of course, me being a sadist, I went and I went and looked it up, and that man's knee was like a backwards L. Like, it was not good. It was really not good. And, yeah, just a really talented guy, really likable guy, and it's sad. The music was justified.
Sadly, I mean, I knew immediately. I was looking down during the play that had happened, so I didn't see the play itself in real time. I look up, and I see one of his teammates trying to help Chubb up. Chubb's like, mm-mm. And then I see him lay down. I hear him yell, and I'm like, Nick Chubb is a tough motherfucker. If he's yelling in pain right now, we're in trouble. And then to top it off, to make it so much worse, you hear the crowd groan.
Oh, the gasp was
I knew that it was
day.
Because they showed the replay. I was like, it's so sad. And look, yes, I'm a Nick Chubb fantasy owner. Obviously, this all goes so far beyond fantasy. It could not have happened to, I think, a more likable player. Like, this is one of the most universally liked players in the NFL, just because he plays so hard. He's so fun to watch. And I don't think I've heard the man speak a word ever. I don't know if it's the silent assassin sort of shtick that makes everybody love him, but everybody does love him. And this sucks. It's a big blow to the Browns overall, but we do have a lot of other running back injuries. Pat, we'll go through all of these and talk about what the real life fantasy implications are and who the options could be to bring in, just for a big picture perspective here of some of the guys who can be available outside of the organizations that we're about to talk about, whether that be free agents or potential trade targets. We've got, obviously, Kareem Hunt and Leonard Fournette, kind of the leaders of the old guard, the old vets out there, even though I think they're both like 28. They're not actually old, but those are the guys that are out there. Cam Akers, who at this rate is going to be traded, the surprise inactive in week 2, which again, we'll dive into that in a second as well. But there has already been calls on Cam Akers per Jordan Schultz. He says several teams have engaged in trade talks, including the Bucks, Ravens, Raiders, and Browns. Some interesting ones in there, particularly the Raiders. I think all of this speaks to the fact that wherever Akers goes, he's probably not headed for anything more than a complimentary role or timeshare.
And to be fair, like, that might be where he's at right now. It's so weird because, like, we've seen this guy be so effective. He was so effective before the Achilles, and then he was really good at the end of the year last year. Like, what a roller coaster. Like, Sean McVay it comes out Kieran Williams is going to be the number one guy, sprains his ankle week 1. It's Akers. He's not good. He's benched, they're going to trade him. They don't trade him. And then he comes back and wins. That guy was probably one of the big league winners last year. And then the hype all offseason. This is Cam Akers' offense. We didn't bring anyone in. And now he's gone. Like, he's as good as he's toast in Los Angeles.
Yeah, it was surprising. I mean, the 22 carries for 29 yards in week 1 did not inspire much confidence, but I did not think that was going to be followed up by a healthy inactive, to which he replied on Twitter, "I'm just as confused as all of you. I'm blessed, though." Are you? All right, moving on. We've got, Pat, rightfully you threw in here Jonathan Taylor. Seems that he's about ready to pass a physical. He's eligible to play in week 5, so any of these teams could go out and try and get Jonathan Taylor as well. I actually looked into it. It wouldn't shock me necessarily if the Browns made this move, because with Nick Chubb, his contract next year, they could, I hate to say this, they could cut him for, it's about $4 million in dead money. They could save $12 million and basically just assign all of that and then some to Jonathan Taylor if they wanted to. They are not tied to Chubb really at all for going forward. So if they, view this injury as a career ender, which sadly it may be, at least for the version of Nick Chubb that we all know and love, maybe they go out and get JT. Again, they are tied to Deshaun Watson, who that's looking like a mistake. But again, they are essentially all in here for the next few years with the money they're paying the quarterback, and they need to try and build a winner. Yeah, he's bad. They need to try and build a winner the best they can, and going to get JT as a weapon could certainly help out. Okay, so we've got Nick Chubb, first injury to break down just what the Browns could do, will do. Right now, I think it's Jerome Ford season, Pat, as you have noted here. Jerome Ford had a really nice game in Nick Chubb's stead last night.
I agree, and I think that's going to happen regardless of who they bring in. I mean, that's what Kevin Stefanski said today. He's like, hey, he's our feature back. We're going to bring someone in. Kareem Hunt visits according to, all the big NFL insiders. But I saw a tweet, and actually, Brandon, you quote tweeted it as well, saying that, you're not to be worried about Kareem Hunt because we know how the Browns feel about him. The Browns kept Jerome Ford, and they got rid of Kareem Hunt. And you pointed out the money being a factor. Like, Ford was probably just cheaper. But I'll be honest, at this point, looking at Ford last night, obviously very small sample size, Ford is probably the better player right now. He's probably the guy that you want. And they're more like Hunt last year was not good, and everyone wanted him to be good and catch a ton of passes, and he was just bad. And one of those guys that just wasn't quite bad enough to drop, just clogging up your bench. I mean, it would be good to bring him in and get a little compliment because, PR strong, that's nothing. So, but again, I do think it's Jerome Ford season, and Brandon, I go Jerome Ford, maybe he'll slip to me. He's owned. Someone drafted him in our league.
Yeah, I mentioned that on Twitter too. Non-PPR leagues are a different breed when it comes to running back being owned. You will not find one with any sort of reasonable workload anywhere on our free agent market. Right? I mean, yes, Matt Breida's out there, and who else? Craig Reynolds is out there. We'll talk about these guys too, but in terms of a guy like Jerome Ford, who is stepping into actually a real workload and seems like he's maybe a good player, those kind of guys are few and far between on our wire. So, I may have to trade for Jerome Ford at this rate.
But in most leagues, he's out there, and he should be your priority pickup.
Definitely.
Whether you've got a top waiver claim or you're doing fab on it, Jerome Ford should be the priority this week, unless you play in a stupid league where a guy like Puka or somebody else is available, Kieran Williams, which they shouldn't be. But it's Jerome Ford season, I think, regardless of what they do.
Yeah, I would bump out if they brought in Kareem Hunt. Look, obviously they need depth. I would prefer they bring in depth that makes me a little less worried about potential competition. I think Jerome Ford is, like you said, going to be the lead dog regardless. Bringing in a guy like Kareem Hunt, he's going to command some work, and I would like to see Jerome Ford, who we still don't know exactly what he is as a player yet, needs all the touches he can get if he's going to maintain fantasy relevance. We cannot step into a spot here where it's Jerome Ford and Kareem Hunt in a 50-50 split, because I think with, Jack Conklin now out for the year, I believe it was, there is, I just don't think this Browns offense is going to be good enough to support two decent running backs.
Yeah, and I mean, we'll talk about Deshaun later, but, I see people on Twitter saying basically just, start swinging the ball, go 3-4 wide all the time, let him do what he did well in Houston. Maybe it'll help, but, at the core, they were run first offense. So is Jerome Ford just going to get inserted in that? Are they going to throw the ball more? But out of all the injuries, this probably, I think, has the most clear-cut resolution here.
Yeah, definitely.
So, I mean, maybe we'll talk about New Orleans in a little bit, but that one might be too. But yeah, Jerome Ford, if you can get him, get him. And he's not going to be Nick Chubb though. He's not.
No.
If you did like the hero RB strategy and you only took Nick Chubb, you're hurting. You're hurting right now.
Yeah, I'll say this. Thank God for Raheem Mostert, because if I did not get Raheem Mostert in our draft, Pat, my RB2 would be you. I don't even. James Cook's the RB1 right now, so
I don't have a healthy RB2 on my roster right now. I
It
dropped
is,
3 running backs this one. I had 3 running backs not get a touch on my bench yesterday. 2 of them didn't play a snap, so I cut them all. So I got nobody.
We've got one guy in our league kind of hoarding all the halfway decent running backs. He's got like 6 of them, all projected for 10 plus, because he's got Kyron Williams, Jerome Ford, and like these are guys that he either drafted or picked up before week 1. I don't know what kind of crystal ball he has, but I need to get my hands on it. Pat, the next injury we've got here, we've hinted at basically all these at this point, but Saquon Barkley twisted the ankle. It is described as a pretty standard ankle sprain, initially believed to be out a few weeks, but Brian Daboll has not ruled him out versus the 49ers yet on Thursday Night Football. That seems optimistic. I'm not buying that shit, but it does bring up, the potential that Saquon could be back for next week after this. I mean, I wouldn't think it's impossible. Either way, this is a situation that, yeah, sure, maybe you get a week, 2 weeks of Matt Breida.
Maybe.
One of those games is going to be against the 49ers, and he's just not that good.
Exactly.
If you're really... Yeah, if you're like you said, Pat, you don't have a healthy RB2 on your roster. If you are in that boat, then yeah, go get Matt Breida. He's going to get touches. You at least know that.
Well, let's just put it this way: I have essentially the 3rd waiver claim because there are 2 pretty inactive teams on waivers in front of me, and I'm not claiming Matt Breida this week.
Yeah.
So that's just how I feel about him and the situation. And we may see some Gary Brightwell, but especially against the 49ers on short week.
No,
it's
all bad.
If you're not going to start Matt Breida this week, when are you going to? So so that's basically where I stand in terms of why I'm not really interested. And yeah.
He's just not a long-term play. I mean, if you play in a league where fab is the way that you do waivers, go ahead, throw $5-6 at him if you need a starter. But I mean, I wouldn't be devastated if I missed out on Matt Breida if I were you guys. And with Saquon potentially coming back sooner rather than later, there's just not a clear-cut replacement within the Giants' backfield here. Pat, another injury that was your RB2, David Montgomery. Set to miss potentially a few weeks with a thigh bruise. He's going to miss at least a couple of weeks.
Well, here's the thing. He said that he's going to need a few weeks to heal. Mm-hmm. That doesn't necessarily mean that he'll be doing that off the football field.
That's true.
I would still be really surprised if he played this week. And but I would think that it might only be like 1 or 2 weeks, like, when he got hurt and it looked bad, like to find out that it was only a thigh bruise was a relief. And I'm not terribly concerned. But I think the big thing here is that everyone's going to want Jahmyr Gibbs' season. And I hate to burst your Jahmyr Gibbs bubble, but it's not going to happen. It's just not going to happen. They do not trust him in these kind of short yardage, run straight through the line situations. And honestly, rightfully so. He didn't do that a lot at Alabama. That's not who he is. And Dan Campbell has showed us time and time again that he likes 2 running backs. And as boring as this sounds, like, it's probably Craig Reynolds' season, at least in that role.
Dear God.
And again, we've seen Craig Reynolds have some decent weeks in the past. But the way, like I said, I'm not interested in Matt Breida. Like, I would rather have Craig Reynolds than Matt Breida, because we kind of know that kind of role. And I mean, they elevated Bam Knight from the practice squad. Like, he looked okay last year, and at the end of his rookie year, but I mean, Jahmyr Gibbs will get a few more carries, don't get me wrong, but if people think this is going to be what kind of gets Gibbs a majority of the carry, like what happened to DeAndre Swift last week, that's not going to happen. It's just not.
No. And again, I think these become more desperation plays, and they're still worth talking about because a lot of people are in desperation territory. But could I also see a world where Craig Reynolds takes, maybe, I don't know, 60% of the rushing work, and then Bam Knight takes, 30, and then Jahmyr Gibbs gets 10 of it as far as the rushing. That's probably too low for Gibbs, but you know what I mean? A mix where it's gross for all of them. You're still starting Gibbs no matter what, but could I see Bam Knight ruining Craig Reynolds? Yeah. I probably don't want any of those guys in my lineup, but injuries may dictate, again, except for Gibbs. Injuries may dictate that you need to start Craig Reynolds, and I understand that. I think he's clearly the guy over Bam Knight for now, but if Montgomery misses multiple weeks, maybe Bam Knight takes that role. We will have to see. And then, Pat, Jamal Williams, former Lion here. So he is set. How long is Jamal Williams set to miss? I actually missed that. So
I think Allen said he's going to miss a few weeks, I think.
Okay,
that was
it seems like everybody's
late in the day that...
Yeah, it seems like everybody except Chubb, their timeline is just a few weeks. I don't know. So Jamal Williams set to miss a few weeks. Basically, his time as the stopgap before Kamara comes back is over. And so for the next 2 weeks, it could be Kendre Miller time. It sounds like Kendre Miller could have played last week, according to Dennis Allen. He just kept him out because he, didn't practice all week. But come game day, sounds like he was healthy enough to play if he needed to. And so that pretty much tells us he's going to be healthy enough to go this week, and it's probably going to be the guy. It's either him or Tony Jones or Taysom Hill. So
I really don't think it's going to be Kendre Miller just because of the fact that, a rookie who hasn't played coming off an injury, I don't think they're just going to throw him right at it. I think this is going to be a really, really gross backfield. I'm not starting any of these. Well, I'm starting Taysom Hill if I can. If Taysom Hill is a tight end in your league, which I believe he is tight end eligibility on ESPN Yahoo. I don't think he is on Sleeper though. Don't quote me on that.
Sleeper's ahead of the game because he shouldn't be.
But if Taysom Hill is a tight end, especially if you're struggling at the tight end position, which many people probably are, start Taysom Hill just because of the possibility. He had a pretty nice day. I think he had like 70 yards.
9 carries for 70 yards or so.
And let's be honest, he's better than Tony Jones. I'd rather be giving Taysom Hill the ball. Taysom Hill's, we've seen it somehow where it's like, how does this work? But he's just sneaky. He's a sneaky athletic, but hardest worker and the first guy to leave. But White, yeah. But I'd rather have Taysom Hill. But in terms of Tony Jones and Kendre Miller, I don't want either of them because Tony Jones is just not good. Like the guy, we've seen him before. I think I started him 1 week last year.
I think
when Kamara and Mark Ingram were hurt, and he stunk. He was I think he had less than 10 yards. Like the dude was terrible. But I think what this does is for those of you that took the flyer on Alvin Kamara in the middle rounds, I think you're going to be really, really happy about that because he's going to come into a backfield where Jamal Williams was going to be his biggest problem in terms of scoring touchdowns because we know Kamara is going to catch the ball. Derek Carr loves throwing to running backs. So losing that kind of goal line complement to him, because that was really Kamara's problem last year, is besides that game where he had like 4 touchdowns, he didn't score at all, basically. So, but if you put him back into this offense, it's clear they're slow as shit. They're going to run the ball. I think that blast off, if you can, I guess, buy low. Would it even be buying low? The guy hasn't played yet. I guess you're just kind of buying at face value. But if you can get your hands on Alvin Kamara, I would do it. Only 1 week to go.
Yeah, I think it'll be tough. I mean, if the Alvin Kamara owner in your league is 0-2, then maybe they'll be open to it. I think I've found over my time playing fantasy football that trying to get a guy off of somebody's team when they drafted them knowing that they'd be missing time is difficult because they're like, I've invested this time. I went in knowing I'm going to invest this time, and right before he comes back, you want to take him from me? Fuck you.
Yeah, which is fair.
Yeah, it is totally fair. If you can do it, go ahead and do it. Pat, honestly, I'm interested in Kendre Miller. I don't know what his workload looks like this week, but this is a guy that we heard a decent amount of hype on, throughout the preseason and after the draft and all that. And he's going to step into some opportunity here. It feels not exactly like, but a little bit like the Puka Nacua situation where it's like there's kind of just a name you heard a little bit and you heard it in a positive light. And now you are curious to see what he can do when he's actually on the field. I think if he performs well enough, it could be a situation where he gets touches and even when Kamara comes back. Look, it's an absolute dart throw, but in this running back economy, if you can get a player who, again, could actually be good. He's not a known commodity for being bad like a Tony Jones. Throw that dart. Like it is not going to hurt you. And Kendre Miller, this could be one of the few weeks where he's actually in line for, double-digit touches. So I think it's worth the dart throw at the very least. So that concludes our breakdown of the broken running backs, if you will. Nick Chubb, Saquon Barkley, David Montgomery, Jamal Williams. Tough guys to replace, some tougher than others.
We're still without Austin Eckler possibly again.
Yeah,
so
Austin Eckler, quote-unquote, without a timetable, according to Brandon Staley, whatever that means.
Don't like that.
So
I know we don't have him listed. I know we don't have this on our agenda here, but is like Josh Kelley like the new like Alexander Mattison, where it's like when he gets a chance, everyone's like, oh my god, and the guy just disappoints. Like he just was very disappointing last week. I think almost like he's better in the complimentary role. Like you don't want to give him everything, or you don't want him to be your feature back. But tough. I used a number 1 waiver claim on Joshua Kelley last week instead of Puka Nacua. I have severe regrets. It is a dynasty league, too, to be fair. But but yeah, I have regrets.
I will say to Josh Kelley's credit, the Titans' run defense is really good. So that
possibly
was
the best in the league.
Not necessarily a major surprise that they stymied Josh Kelley. If Austin Eckler is out again, I mean, they've got the Vikings this week. So Josh
you're
Kelley
going back. You're back in, of course.
Yeah, you're absolutely going back. I truthfully, Pat, like Josh Kelley's a guy that even if I had him last week, I wasn't going to start him against that defense. I think you kind of just throw last week out the window. He's not going to be able to. He's not good enough to overcome like horrific defensive matchups most of the time. But if you can get at least a neutral sort of matchup, then he's definitely worth starting. Potentially even when Eckler comes back, because we've seen him be good in that complementary role. All right, some other backfield notes here. So, Pat, I just want to run through real quick the top 10 running backs in PPR leagues. Now, this isn't as bad as I thought it would be, but there are definitely some guys here where it's like, you know, the meme of the Army guys, and then one of them's a clown, and he's just like trying to blend in and just doesn't.
It's obviously Kieran Williams, yeah.
Yeah, well, there's a few clowns here. So Christian McCaffrey, number 1, not a clown. Then, this is in order, 1 to 10 in PPR leagues. Christian McCaffrey, Kyren Williams, Brian Robinson, Tony Pollard, Bijan Robinson, Raheem Mostert, Saquon Barkley, Derrick Henry, James Cook, and Ramondre Stevenson. So quite a list. I don't think anybody expected to see Kyren Williams, Brian Robinson, or Raheem Mostert in here to start the season out.
I wasn't expecting it, but I've got a lot of Brian Robinson, and I've been starting him. And I've got a lot
of Raheem Mostert, so I can't really complain.
Yeah, I think I've got Brian Robinson in 3 out of 5 leagues. Like he dominated the touches too. Antonio Gibson, I think we're just realizing Antonio Gibson's just kind of bad. And Brian Robinson, yeah. I think people kind of undersold his pass catching ability, and he doesn't need a pass catching complement. Like he can do it himself. And again, the guy's not like an elite runner of any kind, but yeah, he's been really nice, and I don't see it stopping, quite frankly. Maybe not at this rate, but I think he's going to be basically a set-it-and-forget-it guy. Again, especially in this running back economy. He is a set-it-and-forget-it guy.
No, I've been shocked at the workload for Brian Robinson. We'll just start with him. But he, like, in the preseason, we saw, you know, a good amount of mixed work between him and Antonio Gibson. Pretty even split. There wasn't even really roles assigned. It was like each of them were getting a decent amount of receiving work, decent amount of the rushing work. And then now the season starts, Pat. We're through 2 games. Brian Robinson has outcarried Antonio Gibson 37-5 through 2 games. And he's out-targeted him 5-4. I mean, so neither of them are getting a lot of targets, but the fact that he is winning the target game as well is just kind of wild. I don't know what to make of this. All I will note with Brian Robinson is this has been a very hot start, but he does have a tough 2-game stretch coming up here versus Buffalo and versus Philadelphia. Buffalo did get gashed by Breece Hall, but I mean, he's a top 3 talent at the position, so you can't really expect a guy like Brian Robinson to do the same. And then Buffalo stifled Josh Jacobs this week. So Josh Jacobs also looks like he has no
I don't know
life.
what the word is for what happened, but it's they did something to him because they fucking sucked.
Yeah, he wasn't very good. And then Philly hasn't allowed a 30-yard rusher through 2 games. 30. Hasn't even allowed a 30-yard rusher. They played the Patriots, both Ramondre and Zeke, 30 yards, and they played Alexander Mattison, 28 yards. So tough matchups coming up for Brian Robinson. We're going to find out really quick how real he is. I think he's probably not quite this good, but I mean, if he's going to keep getting this type of workload, it doesn't matter. It's an absolute steal based on where you got him in your fantasy drafts. Pat, rewinding here to Cam Akers a little bit. So a healthy scratch here. Kyren Williams is clearly the RB1 on this team. If you drafted him or scooped him up off waivers, I think this is going to be a guy that is the guy that's kind of the face of this fantasy season. I'm not really afraid to say that at this point, because watching the Rams, Matthew Stafford looks incredible.
Vintage
I feel
almost.
I feel like we should have factored in more the possibility that this would be the case, that a fully healthy Matthew Stafford is just ripping the ball, making that offense move. And if you look at Kyren Williams' numbers, I mean, first of all, he's being targeted an insane amount for running backs, but also he's scoring a lot of touchdowns, which is kind of buoying his fantasy point totals. And that's probably going to keep happening if Stafford keeps helping them move the ball the way they have been. So I think this is a guy that's going to have value all year long. If you can somehow still, I don't know, buy Kyren Williams from an owner that doesn't think this is legit, or if you can pick him up, do that, because this guy's going to be a beast.
Yeah, and my first thought was when I saw Akers healthy scratch, I'm like, this backfield is going to be Zach Evans down the line. Like, this is what happens. And he's still a healthy scratch as well. Well, they had like Ronnie Rivers and God, I don't even know who their other Royce Freeman. It was Royce Freeman.
Oh God,
so like
right.
they'd rather have Ronnie
Royce.
Rivers and Royce Freeman active than Zach Evans. So like, I was almost like, that's going to be my sneaky pickup that's going to help me down the line. But I don't know. But in Williams, again, he's not like there was a lot of discourse today on Twitter about like how like Field Yates said he's been incredible. And everyone's like, oh, well, he's not incredible. He doesn't do anything incredibly. And it's like, he scores fantasy points incredibly this year.
Exactly.
It's called fantasy football, folks. Like, you don't have to be good, or you could be a great player and not be a good fantasy player. Like, it can go both ways there. So, but yeah, he's not this kind of like freak athlete, great running back, but he's getting the job done in a Sean McVay offense where, we've seen him obviously lean on a guy like Todd Gurley, who was way more talented. But I don't think they're going to be afraid to lean on Kyren Williams too. And like, everything looks good in Los Angeles, man. We'll
so
talk
weird.
about the Puka Tutu combo,
yeah.
But yeah, things are looking good there. Yeah, if you got Williams, like the guy in our league snagged him week 1 Sunday at like 11:30.
What did he know? I want to know what he knew.
And he didn't have Cam Akers either, I believe. So that was
he does not.
Just sheer gut
Clairvoyance.
feeling there,
I'm impressed, because I've done similar things in the past where I remember picking up James Conner like before the Le'Veon holdout was a real headline, and it was just like, kind of odd he hasn't shown up yet. I was like, give me James Conner. And then I picked up, I remember, ironically, Nick Chubb, I think a week before they traded Carlos Hyde and unleashed him his rookie year. So look, sometimes the energy, the juju just enters your brain and lets you pick these guys up. And that's what happened to our league mate with Kyren Williams, and he is definitely benefiting from it. But yes, we'll talk about the Rams again in a little bit. That team is just moving. They are a potential playoff team if they keep doing this. I mean, that defense, I still don't really know who plays on it outside of Aaron Donald, but they've got, they're doing enough to at least look like a good product on the field for the most part. All right, Raheem Mostert, Pat. I talked about him before. He has been an incredible value for me and for anybody else that drafted him. I feel like with the state of running backs right now, you kind of just have to ride this out, because right now Raheem Mostert very much feels like a ticking time bomb in terms of fantasy relevance. We've seen this before. He is a 31-year-old running back with a litany of knee injuries. I drafted him figuring I would get him for the duration of Jeff Wilson's IR stint, if it was a minimum IR stint of 4 games. But I just don't. If somehow somebody in your league is willing to buy Raheem Mostert for what he's done from a production standpoint thus far, get him off your team right now, because I'm not one that likes to predict injuries, because I know they can be fluky, but this guy, like a full workload like what he's been getting, is not going to end well for Raheem Mostert. I hate to say that, but he's been a beast so far.
I'm more concerned about Jeff Wilson than I am any potential injury, because obviously Mike McDaniel loves this guy. Like, he had a huge role. He had a decent role in San Francisco just as the goal line back, going back to like 2019, 2020. And then, excuse me. And then obviously he trades for him. You don't trade for running backs unless you really like the guy. So they really like him. And especially at the goal line, like if Wilson kind of gobbles up that goal line work, Mostert's not a great pass catcher. Neither's Wilson for that matter, but like a little inside thing here. Bran and I were talking about a possible Raheem Mostert for Puka swap. And the main reason why I didn't really want to do it was because of that, was because of Mostert. Not because, like, no, I'm all in on Puka. This guy's a stud. That's why I honestly kind of wanted to trade Puka, because I'm a little scared. We'll talk about that too. But yeah, Mostert, more so just the situation than injuries. Like, Miami loves multiple backs. They just don't have another guy to use. Like Savon Ahmed, A-Chain's been worthless so far in fantasy. So, I mean, enjoy it. Like you said, enjoy it while it lasts. You're starting Raheem Mostert until you can't. And, maybe we'll be wrong. We've got a little we were wrong section. Maybe that could be a weekly thing where we're just instantly wrong about a take. So maybe Raheem Mostert will be there. But, yeah, I'm scared. I don't have any. I think I have one Mostert on one team, and it's like I'm not, banking on anything beyond.
Yeah, I'm just kind of going with it for now. And like I said, my team is a ticking time bomb because he's my RB2, and I do not have another running back to potentially plug in my lineup right now. But the one thing I'll say about Jeff Wilson too, Pat, is based on Mike McDaniel's quote from when he got hurt, it's no guarantee that he's back week 5, and
agreed.
It's actually no guarantee he's back this season. So you
Very
can ride
ominous.
out Raheem Mostert for as long as he is healthy and the lead back of the Dolphins. He's going to be productive. There are a lot of things ominously in the future for Raheem Mostert's outlook. There is a potential Jeff Wilson return eventually. There's the high likelihood that he gets hurt and misses at least a game or two. And then there's Devon A-Chain just slowly cooking and eventually we think going to get some sort of workload in this backfield.
And then there's Jonathan Taylor. So, I still feel like if he gets traded, Miami's one of the prime destinations for him. So, yeah. Again, you enjoy it. Enjoy the fantasy points. But, yeah, I think he might be arguably the most sell-high player, or Mostert. He may be the most sell-high player in the whole league.
He's also my fucking boy, because if I didn't have him, I do not know where I'd be right now. But, yeah, if you can sell high on him, do so. If you're in a sharp league, they probably will not buy this 31-year-old running back off of you, which will mean you have to ride it out. But that's not going to be a bad ride for however long it is. Pat, DeAndre Swift, this was Thursday Night Football, and, man, this did not go how I expected it to.
Me neither.
The man, it's career high in rushing yards on 28 carries for DeAndre Swift. Rashad Penny, a non-factor, with Kenneth Gainwell out with a rib injury and Boston Scott leaving that game at some point midway through.
Yeah,
it was the DeAndre Swift show.
And Penny didn't get a touch until Scott got concussed, excuse me.
Mm-hmm.
So, I thought it was going to be all Penny. I was looking for him on waivers and leagues because I'm like, they don't trust DeAndre Swift. They're, Penny's going to be in that Gainwell role, and then if he does really well, they may ride it or, lean on him. I only picked him up in one league. He was swiftly dropped today. But Swift looked amazing. That was probably the best game of his career. And the thing I put in here is that they need to stick with him. They like Kenneth Gainwell. They've been using him, but again, he's more of this kind of crafty player, a good pass catcher. He's not an every down back. He's not like this kind of lead back the way DeAndre Swift can be. And we've seen it from DeAndre Swift, and he was great. Granted, the game flow kind of helped them. They were leading. They were eating up a lot of clock. Minnesota couldn't stop anything. So it really benefited him, but this is a great offense who's going to have a lot of red zone opportunities, even with Jalen Hurts. And I think it's just going to be the question, does Nick Sirianni say this guy's our RB1 with some Kenneth Gainwell rather than more of an even split, or the opposite, which we saw in week 1?
Yeah, I think Swift is kind of the ultimate sell high right now, honestly. He looked really good, and if you're going to keep him, I have no qualms with that either. But this was kind of the perfect storm for making a crazy DeAndre Swift game. Look, they had no other running backs apparently because Penny stinks, but the Eagles obviously do like Kenneth Gainwell for whenever he's healthy. The Vikings defense has been porous so far, and I just think that when Gainwell is back, he's still going to command probably double-digit touches. DeAndre Swift will probably also get double-digit touches, and then you've got Boston Scott's still going to mix in, and Jalen Hurts is going to poach all these one-yard rushing touchdowns. It's not going to be every game that the Eagles are putting up that high amount of points. And I think DeAndre Swift may be a guy, unlike Raheem Mostert, where there's still a lot of name value left with DeAndre Swift. I think that's still a name people look at and they're like, ooh, and then if they see the point total attached to it, they're going to be like, oh.
Ooh, so, yeah, absolutely.
As much as DeAndre Swift is going to be, I think, at least a usable flex on a week-to-week basis, if you can sell him at RB2 type of value, I would probably do so because I think things are going to come back a little down to earth for DeAndre Swift. We're not going to get back to his one touch week 1, but we're not going to get back to 28 carries anytime soon either.
And again, we may not see the Eagles in that kind of situation where they can give a running back 28 carries like that.
Right.
You don't know. But again, it's one of these cases where like it's what should be done, but it probably won't. I still think that Swift is going to be the more prominent guy going forward, but I think there's going to be enough Kenneth Gainwell to where you are not confidently starting Swift on a weekly basis.
Yeah, I think Swift is probably the better player, but they just like Gainwell a pretty good amount too. So it's going to be both guys are going to be involved, and Jalen Hurts is going to vulture touchdowns. So good luck. We're kind of back to square one. Honestly, DeAndre Swift getting 12 to 13-ish touches is like what we expected coming into the year. Week 1 was the surprise, and then week 2 was the overcorrection. It was necessary based on injury, but we're kind of back to square one here.
Yeah.
Pat, James Cook, he is another. He's my RB1 now, so great. Just kill me. But no, he looked really good.
Would you like Isaiah Pacheco?
No. James Cook has looked really good. My concern with him is that he just isn't going to score a touchdown all season long unless he breaks one for 50 yards. He may not need to, though. He had about 150 all-purpose yards this past week, and he's a dynamic player on a really dynamic offense, so I'm really not that concerned.
He is such a talented player, but the ceiling is just capped based on Damian Harris and Latavius Murray. Like
Latavius Murray more so. Like the ancient Latavius Murray is the bigger pain in the ass here
than Damian Harris. But yeah, and the other thing, obviously Josh Allen's, very imposing at the goal line. So yeah, I actually traded James Cook in a league this week just because I had a lot of running backs, and I just I just wasn't sure that he was really going to reach his true potential. But, I mean, he's your RB1. That's not ideal, but, like, especially in like, our kind of league, you got to start a guy like James Cook. Like, I wish I had James Cook.
Yeah. I mean, we're in, like we said, non-PPR. I mentioned the top 10 PPR running backs earlier, and James Cook was RB9. I'm actually going to look up really quick where he's at in non-PPR. Not that this is relevant to more than maybe 3 people that'll ever watch this because, RB17 in non-PPR. So that's the disparity there. He's going to be a guy that catches a lot of balls. Yeah, it's a big difference. It's a big difference.
Sucks.
Yeah, non-PPR, though, Raheem Mostert is the RB4, so he's my real RB1, I guess. But yeah, James Cook, he's such a dynamic player that he's going to be good all year. It's just, again, the touchdowns. I think eventually, Pat, I really do think they're going to manufacture some touchdowns for him because this offense is so good. They're going to be near the goal line so often that eventually, I don't know if it's 4, 5, 6 weeks in, but it's going to become a meme. Like, James Cook doesn't have any touchdowns. He's not scoring. Like, they're going to be like,
it'll be like the free Aaron Jones. Is James Cook the new Aaron Jones, the Matthew Berry hashtag? Like, very similar deals here.
Yeah.
But yeah, again, like you said, really dynamic player, really good offense. And we talked about last week how they didn't have a wide receiver too. Everyone was their wide receiver too this week except Stephon Diggs. Gabe Davis catching a touchdown, Khalil Shakir, Dawson Knox, Kincaid. Again, Kincaid's got the participation. He's got the routes run. He's got the targets. It's great. The production is not there. Hold tight on Dalton Kincaid. Do not panic. I still truly believe that it's going to happen at some point, but yeah, they just fucking steamrolled the Raiders. Like, the Raiders looked horrible. Horrible.
Yeah. The Raiders looked more like what I expect the Raiders to look like for the rest of the season, sadly. Pat, let's get to some just objectively less talented running backs. Zach Moss played every snap.
What the fuck?
Played every snap for the Colts. Now, look, I know they're not dealing with a whole lot of talent here to disperse these touches to, but I also figured it would be a little bit more, I don't know, work literally anyone else in. But no, instead it was all Zach Moss. He put together a really nice fantasy day, and this is just kind of, if you have Zach Moss, good for you. But I mean, Pat, do you take anything else away from that? Because I'm just kind of ignoring it, honestly.
Well, again, you want to ignore it because it's Zach Moss, and the joke is that he's like fat and slow and can only score touchdowns. But he looked good, and like especially if Gardner Minshew's the quarterback, and it's not Anthony Richardson, because Anthony Richardson looked great in the 3 drives before he got concussed. Hopefully he's okay, but if Richardson's not there to kind of vulture some of the rushing work, I think you need to have Zach Moss. Zach Moss should be owned in most leagues just for the possibility that when Jonathan Taylor comes back and they trade him, they clearly believe in Zach Moss as the clear-cut RB1. Like, there was Deion Jackson played 1 snap on special teams, 0 snaps for Jake Funk. Like, they were all in on Zach Moss. And again, he looked really good at least for Zach Moss standards. Like, he looked really good. And again, not a guy you're going to be excited about, but especially in this running backs are like tight ends this year. It's pretty desolate. Like, if you have Zach Moss, I mean, you've got to start him this week and then until when Jonathan Taylor comes back. And then if Taylor comes back and is the starter, you've got a handcuff that is clearly going to get literally all of the workload. All of it.
Yeah.
If Taylor gets hurt. Again, not a very sexy pick at all, but it's just gross. It's just gross saying it, but if he's still out there in your league and you need a running back, pick the guy up.
Yeah, I mean that's a definite. I mean, look again. Any running back you can find that's earmarked for more than 5 touches, it seems like it's very hard to come by at this point. So yes, go get Zach Moss. I just find it so hard to recommend him and like truly believe in him in any capacity for the rest of the season because he's on a team that is probably pretty often going to have to abandon the run entirely. I don't think he's very good. Anthony Richardson is, yes, he's in concussion protocol right now, but if he misses time, it probably isn't more than a couple of weeks at max, and then he's going to come back and take all the rushing work too. You make a good point about obviously they like him way better than all the other running backs on their roster right now if they gave none of them any touches.
Because they
granted
stink.
A lot of this, I'm sure a lot of that has to do with Evan Hull going on IR as well, but Zach Moss, I guess, is the guy here. So I just feel like, go get him if you really desperately need a running back, but just don't expect a whole lot.
You don't expect this every week, but again, like I think he could be a solid guy that's probably getting you, close to double-digit points on a weekly basis.
He's just feels like such a landmine. Like he's just going to Josh Kelley you more often than not. You know what I mean?
Well, it's also the fact that he's had some injury issues in his career as well, too. Like there's no guarantee that this guy stays healthy. I mean, he's already broke his arm in training camp. So like, but again, with injuries, you can't predict it. But there's also that factor too.
Yeah. Now, Zach Moss was a potential waiver wire or free agent acquisition. So, whatever we expect and get from him is fine. How about a guy that you spent probably a 4th or 5th round pick on with Alexander Mattison, who's just bad? Now, I want to get out in front of this first because this is what made the rounds after this Thursday night game was all of the hate messages this guy got on Instagram and all the racist stuff that was happening. Rule number 1, no matter what negative sentiment it is that you're sending at a player, whether it's, objectively racist and horrible or just, hey, man, you suck, don't tweet at players. Don't do it. Ever.
Never talk.
You can tweet about players if it's, reasonable criticism or obviously something whatever, but don't tag them ever. Don't do that because Mattison got just the worst of the internet after this performance. And I have been one to be criticizing him quite a bit. I'm victory lapping him being bad a little bit, but like seeing what people say, people are awful, man. So don't do that. Let's just get out ahead of that really quick.
These guys are human beings at the end of the day. Like they're athletes. They're our puppets for our silly little fantasy football game. But these are people. Right. Like, come on. Like, you could be mad. Like, you could be mad that he has been bad, but like, leave these guys alone. The only way you should contact players is to tell them to be a guest on the Off the Bench podcast. That's the
exactly.
That's the only time you should ever contact players. If you want to tag a player and say I love this guy, go for it. But leave these guys alone.
Exactly. But to get back on the fantasy train and actually evaluate kind of what happened here, look, the Eagles' D-line is really good, so I'll give a little leeway for this. But Alexander Mattison is just showing what I was worried about the whole time, and it's just that he's not that good of a player. Like he's not a dynamic player. He's not an athletic player. He's the guy with the RB1 role in Minnesota. And we saw week 1 how that can translate to fantasy points here and there. It's mostly going to be, though, touchdown dependent. A touchdown-dependent running back, though, is better than a guy who never has a chance to score any, I guess. Well, he's not better than James Cook, but he's better than a guy who's not on the field, you know what I mean? So he retains a little bit of value, I guess, for that reason, but it also firmly puts him in a position where the Vikings may go looking for a running back at some point. Granted, they're 0-2. They may have to chalk this season sooner rather than later.
And they got the Chargers this week. That's going to be a big one team's going to be really unhappy starting 0-3 after that. But yeah, Mattison, I think another problem too is that this Vikings defense is still not very good. So like they have to throw like crazy to keep up. But that does provide touchdown opportunities. And I think that was kind of Mattison's greatest appeal coming into this, was that this is going to be a strong offense who's moving very quickly because they have to, and it's going to set him up for some opportunities. And like you said, I still think that's going to happen, but it's not going to happen consistently.
No, I just don't think you're really going to feel good about starting Alexander Mattison any week going forward. I mean, I guess if you have like the juiciest running back matchup ever, or Vikings do, I should say, then yeah, maybe you feel a little better about it. But this lack of efficiency, if it continues, like they're going to look elsewhere, whether it's Ty Chandler getting more touches or it's bringing somebody else in. Like they're not just going to sit there and look at 8 carries for 28 yards every single week. You know, it's not going to happen. So Alexander Mattison, look, if you guys drafted him with a fairly early pick, I'm sorry. I think it was probably a bad pick. He's at least startable, I guess, still, but you are definitely not thrilled with what you've been seeing so far. Pat, the Bears backfield, this has been a fluid situation and one that has just quite frankly been very confusing. D'Onta Foreman got a surprising amount of touches in week 1. We weren't sure what we were going to see there because Khalil Herbert had taken the reins or we thought he had, and then this past week, D'Onta Foreman, a healthy and active, joining Cam Akers on the perma bench there. What do we make of this backfield now, other than, I guess, Roschon Johnson's a stash? Because that's really all I'm taking from it.
Yeah, I think he's a priority pickup, honestly. Just because this is a guy that could help you win your league down the line. Again, you don't want to use a ton of fab on him, or you don't want to use a high waiver claim or whatever, but yeah, he's going to emerge in this backfield. And it sucks because, we were in on Khalil Herbert. I have a good amount of Khalil Herbert. And, like, he's still a viable guy. Like, he's going to be kind of in flex consideration for now. But I think this just means the fact that, like, they kept 3 running backs, and one of them was, like, a special teamer. I don't even remember who it was. But the fact that they are scratching Foreman, who is established as a decent running back, over Johnson means they like him. And it means he's probably next in line. And if he can, get more touches and perform with those touches, I think it's going to be his backfield.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, he's the guy that had a lot of, again, a lot of these rookies had hype coming into this season from the preseason, and Roschon Johnson was one of them. So him getting a sort of a split here with Khalil Herbert is definitely notable. And to round out our kind of backfield discussion here, we've got the Ravens, RBBC, the running back by committee. Pat, you just made a trade for one of the guys in that running back committee, and you already had the other one, right? You had Justice Hill on your team, I think.
Yes.
So you now have both Justice Hill and Gus Edwards. So this committee is interesting. We talked last week about how Justice Hill had the 2 touchdowns in week 1, and you said you could see that continuing. I said it would be more Gus. Turns out Gus scored this week, but Justice Hill got more touches.
Justice Hill did get the first crack at the goal line. He just didn't get it.
Okay, I did not notice that.
Yes.
So yeah, these are 2 guys who are both going to have some semblance of value. I don't know what it is, because I do think the Ravens offense is going to continue to move the ball and score, but neither guy you're going to be super thrilled about. Or I guess, are you thrilled about them?
Exactly. It's funny. One of my friends says that just like I love the Ravens running backs, because it seems like every year I've got at least one. Like last year, I had Drake and Gus Edwards, and I was just going back and forth ping pong and starting them the wrong weeks, and it was absolutely miserable. But the way I saw it, the trade I made, I also got Jonathan Taylor in it, so I'm hoping that in a few weeks' time, I will never have to start either Gus Edwards or Justice Hill. But I think the other thing too is that John Harbaugh said, like, oh, we don't need another running back. We have Melvin Gordon, 0 touches. Like, I think the door is still open for them to go and get somebody. And, like, realistically, that's, out of all these teams we've talked about, like, that's kind of the offense that you can go and get more of, like, a feature back. Like, if they, wanted Jonathan Taylor, that would be a great situation, because, honestly, like, Gus and Justice Hill are complementary players. And they're going to complement each other. That offense is going to flow well. it's just going to be really difficult to play the right guy in fantasy. They're not going to blow your doors off, but it's just going to be difficult because they both have potential at the goal line. The other thing, if you're playing PPR, Gus still has not caught a ball since like 2019. And Hill is going to be that pass catching guy. So a little bit more upside on Hill, but it's ugly. But that's the Ravens. When was the last time the Ravens didn't? I guess Dobbins is like rookie year or whatever. Dobbins had 1 year where he stayed healthy, but like they've gone
I don't
through.
even know if he did.
Devontae Freeman, Le'Veon Bell, Latavius Murray, Gus Edwards, Kenyon Drake, Justice Hill. It's been disgusting. But they always have a decent offense. Like they know how to run. Like they know how to run in Baltimore. But like for example, this week, like unless I get somebody on waivers that I can start, I have to start one of them. Unless David Montgomery magically plays. I'm leaning Gus Edwards right now just because I think he's looked better. Like he's not getting the touches, but I think he's looked better with his touches, and I think he's got a little more touchdown potential. And this is non-PPR, so Hills catches mean nothing to me. So right now, if I had to set my lineup, I'm putting Gus in there, but I'm not happy about it, and that's very subject to change.
Pat, did you see who the Ravens brought in for a visit today?
Is it someone like hilarious?
It's Kenyon Drake again. So we may be getting some level of dosage of Kenyon
Raider
Drake.
legend Kenyon Drake.
Kenyon Drake, just the face of disappointment.
That man fell off like a fucking
he was like, what was it? He started in Miami, showed flashes in Miami, and then went to Arizona and just
he looked good. He had that 1 year. I remember I drafted him with the 14th pick. Like I drafted him very early, and he was solid. And then after that, it was just he went to Las Vegas to be a backup and gone.
Mm-hmm.
And now,
Kenyon Drake that first year in Arizona. I mean, he only played 8 games, 643 yards and 8 touchdowns. So I guess not bad for the games he played in. But yeah, Kenyon Drake just not a name that you're excited about seeing in the mix here now with Baltimore. Okay, that'll do it for our backfield breakdown, Pat. We mentioned last week how it's tough in week 1 to try and draw conclusions on teams because they could just be fluky games that'll sort themselves out. After 2 weeks, look, this is still a small sample size, but it's twice as big. So we can try to draw some conclusions here. And I just have a couple here before we get into, some concerns we have from week 1 that carried over, but drawing some positive conclusions. Puka Nacua, and I guess you may be on the other end of this, but I think he's very, very real. And also, all the waiver wire winners are just on the rim. I mean, it's Puka, it's Kyron. Tutu Atwell has been very startable through 2 weeks. And Puka specifically is a very, very real player. 15 targets week 1. Figured there's no way he surpasses that, right? 20 targets in week 2. That is... I don't care if Cooper Kupp comes back and they bring back prime Calvin Johnson and they bring back prime Julio. Like, you get that many targets through 2 weeks, you are going to remain involved. So Puka Nacua is a guy, funny name and all. I want to say go get him. I'm sure he's already been gotten in your league, but like he's a guy who's going to be a player all year long.
Yeah, and like I said, I was trying to trade him. Like I traded away Devontae Smith, but I wanted to trade away Puka. Excuse me, had to mute to cough. And I wanted to trade away Puka just because he's not going to be getting 15 targets a game. But like you said, it's not like he's going to go from 15 to 3.
No,
like it's not going to be that. And again, we still haven't heard a lot about Cooper Kupp. Like he was going to see specialists. Like there is no, just like with Jeff Wilson, there is no guarantee that Cooper Kupp comes back. When his stint on IR is up, but. Even with him, like we've seen the Rams have 2 good wide receivers. We've seen it with Robert Woods, even Brandon Cooks. I mean, Brandon Cooks is a little bit more of like the wild card guy, but we've seen Robert Woods be really productive in the number 2 role alongside Cooper Kupp. And Puka is basically like a Cooper Kupp. He's just going to be a target monster. He's not going to do anything crazy athletically, but this has been insane. This has been insane. And I just said, like, that's what I said. I said, I can't look at this guy on my bench another week. Like, I just can't do it. So I had to get rid of him. Well, I kept him. I had to get rid of somebody.
Yeah, you had to open up that spot. I get that. And yeah, I mean, I saw a report already. I think it was from Ian Rappaport that, Puka Nacua to retain big role when Kupp returns. And I'm like, duh, they need somebody to play wide receiver too. And it's going to be the guy that's gotten 35 targets in 2 weeks. So Matthew Stafford clearly trusts him.
Atwell seems much more like a Brandon Cooks kind of guy, like, going deep kind of on these gadget plays, but again, he's startable too. Like you can go,
he's been good as
especially
well.
until Cup comes back. You're starting Tutu Atwell pretty easily.
Yeah, again, Matthew Stafford right now, the way he's playing is just able to turn a multitude of guys into fantasy relevant players and honestly fantasy stars as far as Nakua and Kyron Williams are concerned. Pat, with all the talk about Puka Nakua though, I do want to give some love to my boy Nico Collins. Very similar sort of start to the year as Puka in terms of gotten a ton of targets, has been uber productive for fantasy. The only downside is that he probably hasn't been in many lineups through the first 2 weeks because people saw week 1 and he's a Texan, and it's like even when you see how well he did in week 1, you may not trust it yet. But Nico Collins is currently the wide receiver 6 on the season. Went for 7 catches, 146 yards, and a touchdown this past week. And I'll say it, CJ Stroud looks pretty good.
CJ Stroud
looks
by
like a
far
guy that
been
can
the best
sling
rookie.
it. Yeah, I mean, Anthony Richardson's making plays on the ground, but C.J. Stroud looks comfortable as a passer.
Very
He
poised.
already has more 300-yard passing games than Justin Fields does in his career. So as far as the Ohio State quarterback hierarchy goes, I don't know.
Stir some shit up there.
I mean,
But,
look, Pat, I unironically thought about picking up C.J. Stroud to, have my own QB competition on my fantasy team with him and Justin Fields because that's how bad Fields has been. We'll talk about
Here
that.
goes your new TikTok series. But
Oh God, yeah, true.
But yeah, like you said,
Nico's been
Stroud,
great.
especially the fact that the Texans' offensive line is in shambles. Like what they've got, at least Tunsil and
Titus Howard?
Yeah.
Titus Howard? Yeah.
Yes, and I believe they have somebody else injured as well. So like Damian Pierce, like we were all over the place on Damian Pierce this offseason. He was in like our bust draft, and then we were kind of like, oh, maybe we're wrong, but I don't think it's Pierce's fault. I just think more so that line is just destroyed, and also the fact they're still pretty bad. Like they're
Right.
they
As
look a
a
lot
team
better. They're
overall.
competitive, but they're going to be losing games and they're going to be throwing the ball. And I started Nico Collins in 3 leagues this week, and then I traded for him in a 4th. So the only league I don't have him is the one that you've got him in. And because the way I see it is like when I have to start a player in one league and have him in others, I don't like them being on the bench. I'm either all in or all out.
I agree.
So, like, I looked at a league and I needed a flex fill, and so I put in Nico Collins, and I'm like, you know what? So I went in my other leagues and I swapped him in. But, yeah, and the thing that's most impressive is he's doing this on, like, 70% of the snaps. Like, he's really not as involved as he could be. But when he's out there, man, is he making up for it. And I think the involvement is only going to get better. I mean, Robert Woods is more so kind of just like a steady. It's Robert Woods. He's a steady as he goes guy, but kind of sneaky. Like Robert Woods, especially like in PPR, certainly someone that you should have on your bench. But yeah, all in on Nico Collins now. He's now tied for my most owned player with Brandon Ayuk. I am all in.
Yeah, the only downside I'll say for Nico going forward could be the emergence of Tank Dell. With Noah Brown going on IR, Tank Dell's snap share essentially doubled, and he had a really good game last week.
I talked about Tank Dell. I brought his name up in our rookie draft. I didn't take him, but I brought his name up. I have Tank Dell in the league, but I've got him on like it's a dynasty, so I've got him on the taxi squad. It's like shit.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
like,
no, it's,
but
yeah, I think Tank Dell will be
if
good
not
here
this
going
year,
forward.
Tank Dell is going to be a guy in this offense. Like they said, Stroud specifically said, "Hey, go and get this guy," and they did. And he's definitely going to build a strong rapport with them. But, yeah, I don't think it's going to be a crazy thing this year. Like, he's going to have his games where Dell is a huge line. But we love Nico Collins. Off the bench, loves Nico Collins.
We love Nico. I
Come
gotta
on the
find a
show.
way to get him in. I gotta find a way to get him in my damn lineup because it's either him or Jordan Addison at this point, and I don't know what to do.
I would start Nico Collins.
Yeah, I think I'm probably. if
We've
I
got
could
a
parlay
viewer
one of these
question
guys
about
into a
Jordan
bag, I'd
Addison
love
coming
to.
up, but I would start Nico Collins, honestly, pretty easily. Like, I would.
Really?
I'm not even putting much thought into it.
Okay, well, we'll tease that, and we'll talk about why here in a little bit. Pat, some concerns here from week 1 that carried over to week 2. So we talked about how a lot of bad quarterback performances kind of headlined week 1, and a good amount of guys did bounce back. I mean, you had Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Justin Herbert all have far superior week 2 performances compared to week 1, especially Josh Allen with his billion turnover performance against the Jets. But all these guys kind of bounced back. Then there were some guys that I'm still a little concerned about. And one guy that you may not think off the top of your head, but Jalen Hurts. And so I'm not super worried about Jalen Hurts from a fantasy perspective just yet. But he put up the numbers this week for fantasy. in real life, I felt like he kind of just looked all right. He wasn't anything special. And honestly, the fantasy value was saved by the 2 tush-push touchdowns. And as we all know, look, that's as unstoppable of a play as there is in professional sports. But it's circumstantial. They have to get to the 1 or 2 yard line, get stopped there, and then, that's what's going to happen. And it's going to be Jalen getting those touchdowns. But that's not going to happen every week. If it did, they used that play last year. Jalen Hurts would have had 25 rushing touchdowns if it was going to happen at this pace, or 35, I guess. And it's just not going to. I thought otherwise, he didn't look that great. There's plenty of time for them to get things going. I just think the Eagles have been fairly underwhelming through 2 weeks.
They have not looked like like the favorite in the NFC, or even not that close to it.
No, it hasn't been a powerhouse situation with the Eagles. So, I mean, look, they're 2-0. You can't complain. They've got time to turn it around. Obviously, they've got the cushion to turn it around at 2-0, so it's not a panic situation. But Jalen Hurts is just a guy that I would say don't look at the fantasy point total from last week and be like, oh, he's back, after a really lackluster week 1 against the Patriots. Don't be like, he's turned it around. I don't think he has just yet. Could happen as early as week 3. One thing I will say about week 3, though, and this is not just me saying this as an A.J. Brown owner, I think A.J. Brown is going to explode this week, because if you saw the heated conversation that happened between Hurts and A.J. Brown on the sideline, A.J. Brown was not happy about the lack of targets and just overall how the game was going, which I didn't love from a football fan perspective, because I was like, you guys are winning. Like, what's the big deal? But as soon as that argument happened, A.J. Brown got targeted twice in the end zone. One of them was a flag, and one of them was just slightly overthrown, if I have both those right. One of them was a touchdown and got called back. Yeah, so, he tried, and I think after him having, I think it was 29 yards in that game, this is going to be a big bounce-back week for A.J. Brown. I think squeaky wheel gets the grease here as far as AJB is concerned. But my eyes definitely on the Eagles overall.
Yeah, I mean, Devontae Smith has looked pretty good, but that's a little more volatile because, he, especially last week, he had 2 huge catches, one of them for a touchdown. If he doesn't get those, You're gonna get. I think there's gonna be some real duds from Devontae Smith, but you're gonna have a lot of weeks where you're really happy with him. But I think Brown is kind of gonna start getting his, and he's gonna be what he was made to be in this lineup, and the steady guy. More of the the true lead guy who's gonna be more consistent. But you talk about Jalen Hurts. I think easily the most concerned you should be about someone is Joe Burrow, mostly just from the injury perspective. I mean, he was dealing with a calf. He was dealing with a calf in training camp, and they've looked pretty bad, like you said, and it's just been so underwhelming. Like they got sparked by a punt return from some rookie white boy whose name evades me. I'm very sorry, but they just have not looked good. Good to see T. Higgins. T. Higgins existed this week. That was good to see for T. Higgins owners, but there's not much to be excited about right now in this Bengals offense. And I think there's a good chance Burrow misses some time because, like, what would you rather have? I would rather have Burrow sit a couple weeks, get right, and then come back stronger than kind of do what he's done the first 2 weeks and just kind of limp through the season. And not only is it hurting him and his teammates fantasy-wise, it's hurting them from a football perspective.
Yeah, it's so hard to evaluate because he hurt this calf in the first day of camp. Basically, we were like, oh no, Joe Burrow's looks bad. We find out it's just a calf. They're like, all right, we'll sit him out the entire preseason, and then come to find out he's still feeling it, and now it's sore enough that he may miss this week and some following weeks. It's like, he missed the whole preseason. I understand that this isn't, he didn't just fully strain it. It's just sore. But how much time is he going to need to get this fully right? I just don't know how you figure that out. And at a certain point, maybe it is you just kind of push through the season with as good of a version of Joe Burrow as you think you can get. But what we've seen through 2 weeks, that's not worth it. You might as well rest him and see what you can do and how much you can heal him up, because he has not been good. He has not been himself. He has not been the highest paid quarterback in the league through the first 2 games of this year. T. Higgins bounced back from a fantasy perspective, but I mean, this is dragging Jamar Chase into the dirt. This has been brutal. If you spent a first-round pick on Jamar Chase, I'm so sorry. And there was a time where there was a time where I firmly thought about doing that because I was like, Bengals have a pretty easy opposing wide receiver schedule. Like, this is as bankable of a connection with a receiver and quarterback as you can get. Yeah, it is, except for the fact that calf injury, that just goes to show you really can never be too careful with like your first round pick or your second round pick. That's why I try to narrow down who I'm going to take. I say this as Nick Chubb blew his knee out, but you can't see that coming. But take into account everything that's happened throughout the preseason. And if there's an injury that, you thought it was nothing, but just ask yourself, what if it was something? And maybe just go with a guy who's a little bit safer. Because I'm not saying in hindsight, oh, yeah, obviously you shouldn't have taken Jamar Chase because of this innocuous calf injury that we all thought was going to be fine. But it's just, you can never be too safe, honestly, when it comes to your first rounder. Because the people that are down Chase are the people that own Jamar Chase. If you're not 0-2, it's probably it's kind of a surprise. Like, you must have drafted really well outside of the first round. So
we've got a guy in our league that went Chase and Cup in the first
Chase
2 weeks.
Chase and Cup, and he is down.
Is he 0-2? I think he's 0-2.
He's 0-2, and he doesn't even have good running. I think his running backs are Alexander Mattison and Cam Akers. So
I might have better running backs than him.
You do. It's bad. It's really bad news for him. He has Mahomes. Yeah. I can't wait to see who tries to poach Mahomes off of him.
And the other thing from the Chase and Higgins perspective is that, we've never seen Jake Browning in, throw an NFL pass. We've seen him in the preseason and whatnot, but they liked him enough. They believed in him enough, knowing that, like, hey, Burrow's got an injury. They didn't go and bring in a veteran. They didn't go and bring anyone else, and they sat there saying, like, hey, if this calf injury is serious, we're going to roll into this season, with Super Bowl aspirations with Jake Browning at quarterback. Yeah. So, like, obviously they believe in this guy enough, but I guess we'll just have to – we'll see if we actually have to see him, but time will tell what his deal is and how he could possibly impact these guys, but – really bad time to be a Bengals fantasy owner. I have 0 Bengals on any teams, which I'm very, very happy about right now. That I have 0 Bengals equity, which has helped me sleep at night.
Yeah, the 0-2 Cincinnati Bengals. Who would have thought we'd be sitting here saying that? Pat, another concerning quarterback here, and one that I have a lot of investment in, Justin Fields. So we had somebody ask last week, what quarterback should I pick up? Because I'm a Justin Fields owner. I'm freaking out a little bit. And we both basically agreed, nobody. Like, don't worry about it. This is a guy who, at least for fantasy, should be pretty good. You don't need a backup quarterback if you drafted Justin Fields. That might not be the case. So here's the biggest thing with Justin Fields, right? I predicted a bit of a jump forward for Justin Fields. I thought he would take that leap and become, a top 10 or so quarterback. I thought the passing would progress. The passing has not progressed, but when I drafted him, I also took into account that might not be the case. The reason I drafted him is because of the rushing floor. I was like, even if he's a bad real-life quarterback, they're not going to make a quarterback switch this season. So, he's a fantasy pick. He's going to at least run a lot. Pat, through 2 weeks, 4 designed runs for Justin Fields. 4.
Basically what was happening at the beginning of last year.
And they have the same offensive coordinator. It's like he reset his brain when the season restarted. Like, they unlocked Justin Fields at the game that I was at last year against the Patriots, where they let him run wild. They came up with all these design runs, and he was great, both for real life and fantasy. You got them into more scoring situations. Look, if the guy can't really throw that well, I understand you want to try and develop that to see if you can make him your franchise quarterback. But at this point, even if you are doing that, why are you scripting out what he's best at completely?
Yeah, exactly.
Like, that doesn't make any sense. You need to have some sort of mix, because then, at least he has some confidence, and the defense has to be kept honest when those passes come, because they're worried, oh, what if he takes off? Instead, they're not designing anything. They're not helping Justin Fields. And Justin Fields, I know he's not helping himself either, but this is just a disaster for fantasy purposes so far.
Yeah, and the thing, too, is that, obviously, you don't want, you want him to progress throwing the football, because if you're going to be a successful NFL quarterback, you have to do that. But at least play into his strengths, because, football's mental, too. Like, if he's running the ball feeling good, he's going to feel, he's going to be better all around. But, he has just been really bad. And, a lot of the big discourse on Twitter is that he's just bad. Like, that's just him, unfortunately. Yeah. And I'm not ready to join them yet. But you're panicking a little if you've got Justin Fields. I would say keep faith, keep starting him, but you're getting into that territory where you might, Brock Purdy might be looking pretty good right now. Right now.
Oh God, yeah. No, we're at a point where that if that safety net of floor of rushing value is not there, like, am I going to keep trotting Justin Fields out there? Yeah. Do I feel good about this matchup with the Chiefs? Fuck no, I don't. I am very nervous about this week. This game getting out of control. Them just sending the house at Justin Fields and him pooping his pants like we've seen him do several times this year already. I'm hoping that they start to mix in some more of these runs now that these stats are getting put out there. Granted, coaches claim they don't pay attention to any of that stuff, but like through 2 weeks with how bad this offense is, something's got to change, I would think. But we've also seen the Bears be illogical about this in the past for as much as
they do
2
have
months.
a bit of incompetence.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm hoping. I would love for Luke Getsy to just get the fuck out of there, but I just
Getsy the fuck out of there, sorry.
Whatever. Okay, and one more quarterback here. Deshaun Watson stinks.
Darn.
I know. We're all very
Play
upset
the sad
that Deshaun
music.
Watson-
Oh, man.
yeah,
Why do
wait.
bad things happen to good people, man?
Yeah, this is all very different. It should have been him and not Nick Chubb that blew his fucking knee out.
Holy shit, you're not wrong.
So what I've seen, this is the narrative now on Deshaun Watson, and it's hard to disagree because we're all grasping at straws trying to find an explanation of how an athlete, a quarterback, still in his prime in terms of age, is so different from what we saw in Houston, right? And people are like, I think he's got a guilty conscience, and it's just ruining any sort of confidence and mental processing that he used to be able to do seamlessly when he was just the big man on campus all the fucking time. I think that's part of it. I also think when you take, so much time off in your prime, the quarterback play is so timing based and so rhythm based. Like, he's played quarterback every season, every year, his entire life since he was whatever age he started playing football, and then finally he takes a full year off. That's going to weigh on you. I think we, myself included, underestimated the impact that could have, but we're through 2 weeks now, and he's not. I don't think we're ever getting prime Texans Deshaun Watson. And again, darn, very depressing.
Yes, well, let's all hold a moment of silence. Fuck you, Deshaun.
Yeah, now that Nick Chubb is out of the picture too, I think any hope of the Browns being a playoff team is probably cooked.
Well, that's the thing. Like they easily could have won that game last night too. Arguably, I mean, there was clear pass interference on that last play there. I don't, who knows what it would have turned into, but they're a team that's competing and they should be. And it's like with no Nick Chubb and just pedestrian quarterback play, but but again, it's also karma for the Browns to give this scumbag, a fully guaranteed contract, and now it's going to hamstring them for the next few years. And people are saying trade for Jonathan Taylor. It's like, with what money? Like what? Like where are they going to find that money? Like, but yeah, it's just such a shame. Like I've been thinking about it a lot. It's just been really hard for me to process. Like I'm just really I'm going to need to do some thinking time here, and I'll report back.
Yeah, some soul searching. Okay, that'll do it for our quarterbacks that we are, concerned about, and whether we care or not varies by specific player. But Pat, I do need to hold all of us accountable. I think me more so because you were definitely.
I went back and watched.
Christian Kirk.
I went back and watched the archives because someone, our friend Brett, a loyal listener, B Dags, where you at, brother? He's like, off the bench said Kirk was washed, whatever, and I'm like, no, I didn't. He's like, you did, and I went back and I watched.
You were more behind Christian Kirk.
You were slandering Christian Kirk, and all I said was that he is not as good at football as Calvin Ridley. I almost just called him Calvin Austin, but he's and that's still true. But I think what's the saying, like the rumors of his death have been greatly exaggerated. Like this, and I did say this last week as well, is that like this was a guy that was getting peppered with targets last year. And we saw that same guy again, and that's not going to happen every week. But he's also not going to be getting, 3 targets, 1 catch, things like that. Like, it's going to even out, but he doesn't have the upside of Calvin Ridley still. But he is still a guy, people are dropping him after last week. It's like, what are you doing? He's still definitely a guy that you should be in consideration for your lineups. He's just going to be far less reliable than he was last year.
Yeah, look, the concern with Christian Kirk was all throughout the preseason, the alignment suggested he was only going to be playing the slot, and when they go too wide, he's not even going to be on the field. Snap share jumped drastically this past week for Christian Kirk. 60% of snaps in week 1, 81% week 2, played more than both Calvin Ridley and Zay Jones. Zay Jones was the one whose playing time really took a dip, though. It went from 89% to 66%, so they basically flipped, give or take.
Still think Zay Jones is viable, though.
I think he is too. Here's the thing. I think both Zay Jones and Christian Kirk are going to become sort of boom bust wide receiver threes. And Christian Kirk, that's more for him than what I expected, truthfully, after week 1. I thought week 1 confirmed all the concerns I had about him, that he wasn't playing, wasn't getting targeted. And I was like, okay, cool. Yeah, he's done. And then this past week, he gets 14 targets. I'm like, yeah. Oh. Got it. Okay, so he's still around sometimes. Yeah, I don't think, like we said, this isn't going to happen every week. Calvin Ridley is going to be the better and certainly more consistent player on a week-to-week basis. 2 catches on 8 targets this week, so definitely not a good game from him. But in general, he's going to be the guy you want. Christian Kirk, though, not droppable and a guy you can definitely throw into your flex.
Who would have thought? Who would have thought that game would be like a defensive showdown? Like,
oh my God. I think I saw a stat. Awful. It was like that was the only game that didn't hit the over, and it had the highest over-under of the slate. So it was the only one that didn't hit the, and it wasn't even close. Like it wasn't like it.
That game frustrated me on both sides of the ball from a fantasy perspective because the Jags had 4 catches where a receiver caught the ball in the end zone, but could not get both feet down. 4 times. I mean, granted, 2 of them were on one drive, so 3 different times. And Trevor was just so mid. Like, the game was just mid. If Trevor even gets 2 of those touchdowns, we got a different game here. He's got 17 points, whatever. And then the Chiefs frustrate me, man, because, like, after, almost pressing the nuke button after Clyde Edwards-Helaire got the first snap, it's Isaiah Pacheco's backfield.
Yeah, he didn't play.
He got all but 2 of the, maybe even 1, all but 2 of the running back touches. The only problem is he only got 12 touches. Or 13. He caught 1 pass for no yards. And he got 75 yards. Like, he looked good. Like, this guy's a good player, but
he
just doesn't have the usage. And it's not that he, like, is stealing it from someone else. It's just, like... And also, Mahomes, I think, had, like, 6 or 7 rushes himself, but...
Yeah, he did. 7 carries for 30 yards.
Man, Mahomes is so fucking good. But that's the problem with Pacheco. It's frustrating because it's like... They don't have to lean on the run. They can still do what they do, but just give, a little bit more. Give this guy some more touches, and I think he'd perform really well. So I'm still, I think Isaiah Pacheco's a lukewarm kind of player where it's like, yeah, he's solid, but he just could be so. Like, there is a clear scenario where he could be performing a lot better.
Yeah, definitely. I think we may all be left wanting more work for Isaiah Pacheco forever, but look, hopefully he gets that workload eventually. Finishing off with our viewer questions here.
We just got a letter. We just got a letter. We just got a letter. Wonder who it's from.
All right, we got a couple good questions here. So first question, and it's a simple one, and I think one that probably a lot of people are feeling through 2 weeks of the fantasy football season. From T-Hop1 on Instagram says, time to panic at 0-2, ? And my initial reaction was, no, obviously not. It's only been 2 weeks. But my answer is, it depends on what you mean by panic, and it depends on your situation. Because, look, if you're 0-2 and you're looking at a lineup of Jamar Chase and maybe Cooper Kupp and Jonathan Taylor, or some combination of these guys that are sinking your ship and things aren't going to get better, within the next 2 weeks. Panicking in the sense of I need to make a move right now, maybe the move. Yeah, like you may need to sell some of these guys who are longer-term bets so that you can stack up wins now. Because if you're sitting there at 0-4, 0-5 when you get your cast of Jamar Chase, Jonathan Taylor, and Cooper Kupp back, yeah, you might have the best team in the league by week 5, but it's not going to matter because at that point, unless you go undefeated, volatility says you're probably not going to go undefeated, even if you have the best team. And even if you do go undefeated, you're going to be 8-4 or 7-5 or something like that. And yeah, I think it very much depends on your situation. But if you're 0-2 and it's strictly circumstantial and it's because of players that, we fully expect to bounce back here going forward, or you just lost a matchup 160 to 155. No, don't do anything different. Just understand that the math will work itself out eventually, or it's just one of those years where you're going to get fucked. Those happen sometimes too, but it doesn't mean nuke your team to try and fix it. If your team is performing or you have players that appear like they're going to perform going forward, don't freak out. But if you're 0-2 and things are kind of in shambles, yeah, make a move.
Yeah, nothing really to add to that. Just like, obviously, if your team just fucking sucks, then yeah, panic.
Yeah,
obviously,
exactly.
but like I'm in a league where I'm the highest scorer and I'm 1-1. Like that still pisses me off. It's like,
yeah,
I lost a 160 to 150 game last week. And like, even if I was 0-2, like I wouldn't necessarily be panicking because it's like I know I have a good team, or like you said, you can make moves. So once you're at like 0-4, panic.
Yeah, understanding what panic means and what your next move should be, I think, is the key part of this. And then last question, should I sell high on Jordan Addison or keep him for a flex spot in half PPR? This question from Lee and Andro on Instagram as well. Pat, I'll let you go first because you mentioned Jordan Addison versus Nico Collins earlier. Nico was an easy choice for you.
See, I thought this was an interesting question because of like the sell high kind of thing, because I think it's only going to get better for Jordan Addison, but it's going to be different. Like, right now he is kind of like Devontae Smith we talked about. He's catching these big touchdowns, but he's still ceding a lot of playing time to KJ Osborne. And the fact of the matter is because, such an important factor is blocking. And, obviously KJ Osborne's a much bigger guy than Jordan Addison. Jordan Addison's not a big guy. But for that reason, though, I would say hang on to him because I think these big plays may come down, but I think those snaps are going to correct itself. Like I think eventually as the year progresses, he'll fit in better in that offense and do the not sexy things that the coaching staff wants them to do. And he'll really emerge as the number 2 target in this offense, but on more of a consistent basis. Like, yeah, you love the big touchdown catches; those are great, but they're fluky. You can't rely on that.
So hesitant to start him. Like that's why I'm even now after seeing it for 2 weeks, I don't really want to put him in my lineup. And you shouldn't
but that's why with Nico Collins, because I think Nico Collins' floor is just so much higher right now. But I think Addison's floor is going to get higher. So obviously, if you're getting a really good offer for him, do it. But if you're not getting what you want, don't just, sell high for the sake of selling high because it's weird. Like I think better days are ahead, but I just think it's going to be different better days.
Yeah, no, don't sell high in the sense that selling high implies that this is the best it's going to get, right? Like if you want to trade him for some other reason, like positional need or whatever, I'm considering it. I mean, that's one thing, but to sell him because you're like, oh, his value is going to go down from here, I just really don't think it will. This is a guy that could easily approach, a wide receiver, back-end wide receiver 1, high-end wide receiver 2 territory if he gets a full complement of snaps. He's that good on a team with Kirk Cousins, who's the QB1 in fantasy right now, by the way. I want to smash my head through a wall. I'm glad you at least don't have him in our main league, Pat, because that bragging rights I would want to die.
I wish I did.
I
wish I had fucking Tua, man. Who is the betting favorite to win the MVP, by the way, right now? So just
is he really? Tua?
Right now, yeah. Who else would it be? Who else would it be right now?
But like that's what I get like he's the leader right now, right? Because of stats. But like I feel like he shouldn't be the betting.
As much as he was one of my pals, and I'm doing a 2-week victory lap on him, he's not going to win the MVP. Come on.
No, Kirk might. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah.
Either I'll freak out.
You
but
like that?
No, I would keep Jordan Addison if I were you, just from I think he is going to get better. He's going to play more, and this could be the most deadly wide receiver duo in the league, in a league full of really deadly wide receiver duos. But it could get to that point, sooner rather than later.
Agreed, because you've got the best receiver in the game. First of all,
right?
You're overstating. You're undervaluing Puka and Tutu though, like.
Puka and Tutu, who in a video I stated those names sound more like the names of teacup poodles than they do NFL wide receivers. But nonetheless, yes, they have been very productive for the LA Rams. But I think that's going to do it for us.
On that note.
On that note, we'll see you next week. No, good show today. I think if we were actually able to narrow it down to what were the important fantasy headlines for this episode. Unfortunately, a lot of them were injury-based. Let's hope for some better. Fuck Monday Night Football, by the way. Everybody just keeps getting hurt on Monday Night Football. Aaron Rodgers last week, and then now this. And
you almost said everybody dies. I know you were going for the almost everyone dies, which someone depending on who you ask, he did die. Don't listen to those people. He didn't die.
Well, when you first said that, I was thinking of he temporarily died, but no, the people that actually. What we're referring to is Mar Hamlin's incident was the last Monday Night Football game of last year, and so
was it not Kyler the week before?
Maybe I don't.
It was late in the season on Monday night where he tore his ACL for sure. I don't know if it was consecutive, but.
Yeah, it could have been. I don't know. But Monday Night Football is on a terrible, terrible streak. And I love Monday Night Football, the concept of it. I love football on several days. But, God, if we could save us from these injuries, I would like to. All right. That'll do it for this week, guys. We'll be back next week with hopefully a slightly more positive episode of Off the Bench. But for Pat Gustafson, I am Brandon Carney. We will see you guys next week.
Bye-bye.